Hi, welcome back to Art and Soul. My name is Mike Severin, and I'm really glad you could join me again today. We finished a painting last week of the penguin, and this week I was going to start a new painting, but I thought that I would maybe take this episode and give you a little bit of insight maybe into what I go through on a daily basis working in my studio professionally. And these are maybe some things, some tips and things that might help you in your paintings. And this is a show trying to give you some guidance and some direction and some inspiration. But along the way, you're going to have frustrations if you're trying to paint, and especially in the case that we're going to be working with today, working with a portrait type of a painting. It becomes even more difficult sometimes when you start doing those type of portraits, trying to get things correct. And so I thought I would just kind of go through some of that with you, maybe give you a little bit of some guidance of some tricks that I can give you today that might help. Before we get into the painting itself, I'll go through the palette. I've got quite a number of colors on my palette that we're going to be working with today. We've got our cad yellow, we've got our dioxazine purple, our titanium white, yellow ochre, using a red rose color here rather than the alizarin crimson that we usually use. I've got a straight Mars black here, burnt sienna, and we've got a turquoise. And that's basically all of the colors that I have used in this painting. Now let me explain the painting that I'm working on here. This is a portrait of a gentleman here in town, bass player, that suffered a stroke about a month ago, and I wanted to do a painting of him that kind of represented who he is as a musician, and I'm going to present this to him when he gets out of the hospital and done with the recovery. But I'm going to actually be doing some prints and selling these as a fundraiser for his benefits. So that's the painting that I've got started. Everything I'm pretty happy with all the way around, with the exception of his face. The eyes are still not quite correct, and the lip is not quite correct yet. And I've kind of struggled with it, and I want to kind of go through how to kind of dissect some of that and to where you can understand it, and maybe you've struggled with something similar in your own painting. So we'll go through that here in a minute. I have a photograph that I have here that I basically am working off of this. The coloring is a little different. I've made it a lot more vibrant in the actual painting than what the photograph represents. I wanted it to be representative of which that photograph was taken at a concert that he was playing in, and the lighting is of these blues and these purples that are coming in here are from the lighting for the stage. So that's the reason why I wanted this to be pretty dramatic with the background the way it is, and making it so that the light is really popping, both coming from two light sources, one coming from up here to the left, which would be all of these lavenders and purples, the turquoise, and then there's actually another light source that's coming in from the right side, which is illuminating up this side of the face with more of those yellow tones. So that's kind of where I'm at with the painting. Like I said, I've struggled a little bit with the mouth here and with the eyes. Whenever you're doing a portrait, I kind of try to go away from doing portrait work, because so many times if it's not, the eyes aren't perfect, the mouth isn't perfect, the nose isn't perfect, instantly somebody's going to pick up on that. The eye is going to pick up on that recognition. So it's really important that all of three of those components, the eyes, the nose, and the lips, are correct. The lip or the cheek line can be a little off, even the forehead a little bit, but if those three features right there of the immediate face are incorrect, it's going to just immediately pop out that something's wrong with it. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'd like to work a little bit here on his eye. He's almost got his eyes looking downward. It's not that they're wide open. So that makes it just a little difficult, especially with the shadowing in there, that it kind of makes it a little difficult to interpret that and to make it correct on the canvas. I went in and just grabbed some dioxazine purple, just straight purple, and I think looking at the photograph, and the photograph is really important to have to work off of, and I'm just extending that. I had it darkened right there where that eye is at, but it needed to be extended a little farther back into the eye socket, the eye cavity there. And the same way with this one, I need to bring this in just a little bit. Now I'm using just this angular brush. There's a lot of different brushes that you could be using for this, but this is one that I use quite often, and especially for this, it's real soft and subtle, the blending here that we're doing into what's already there is the undercoating. And that looks much better, just that little bit, just extending that farther into the eye socket. On the photograph, there's some of this, some of these yellow or orangey tones that are catching right there on that eyelid, right below the eyebrow. And I want to take and bring those in because I think it'll make that eye pop out a little bit better. So I'm going to I just wiped my brush off on my paper towel there. I'm going into straight yellow ochre. And I don't want a lot on my brush. I just want a little bit, just to bring in a little bit of a highlight across the top of that eyelid. And I'm not covering up all of that lavender and purples that are in there. I just want to give the indication, and maybe just a hair above the glasses there. And that helps make that eye, gives it the 3 dimension that we're looking for. And maybe we'll do just a little hair across over here. And that made a big difference right there. And in looking at the photograph, I can see that I've got this eyebrow is way too high and it's way too predominant. So I'm going to take now, since I've got that yellow ochre, I'm going to take now and cover up some of the top of that eyebrow, and that will maybe make that look a little closer to the way it's supposed to. Still looks better, but it's still, for some reason, where it comes over here into the shadow right there at those glasses, it just doesn't quite look right. Maybe you'll find that when you start doing portrait work, especially if you are interested in trying it, which I would encourage you to try it, so much of it has to do with the shadowing. Now I've taken this and I've really studied it. I did proportional measurements off of the photograph. Everything is anatomically correct as to where it's at on in the painting, but it just doesn't look right yet. Part of it I noticed was the other day when I was working, this shadow portion here on his lower cheek, I had that too dark, and it made it look like he had really sunken in here, and then this on his cheekbone was really popping out. And so it's one of those things that the shadowing or the highlights are really important to keep in mind, because even if it's anatomically correct, those little things can change the whole appearance of of that character that you're painting. So I think it's better. This needs a little lighter up farther. And I use my finger a lot to blend when I'm doing this type of painting, just because I can seem to soften it better than any of the brushes that I can use. This probably needs a little more popping right across here where that light might be hitting. And again, I'm constantly looking over at my reference material just to try to get that, make sure that I'm putting those spots in the highlights there in the right spot. This on the nose needs a little more defining with the bright, and right there on the edge. See, that already has made a big difference in the way it was before versus now. The other thing that I see happening that needs, I've got too much orange right in this area right here, and it actually needs to be a little brighter more towards these yellows that are here. I think that's going to change the look of his cheek a little bit more just by bringing in a little lighter highlight color there. Which it does. That really changed it a lot there. And I'm looking at my reference material. I think it maybe needs to go down a little farther here. If you notice that the strokes, I use a lot of different strokes when I'm doing this. The biggest thing is that I'm working, wherever I'm putting the color on, I'm working it into the underpainting that I've got underneath of it. So I'm blending it out. I'll start where the main color needs to be, but then I will pull that out in the different directions that it needs to go, just to make it have more continuity. And I am just very, very, very lightly, there's hardly any paint on my brush right now, but I'm just lightly bringing in some of those yellow highlights down into the lower part of his chin and neck, and that looks a lot better right there. The other thing too that I want to point out when you're doing portraits, I always like to do a little study drawing before I actually start the painting itself. And the reason why is because it gives you some real, you start looking at all the detail of the different areas of the face, and those become important when you start actually doing the painting. If you haven't studied it beforehand, it's real easy to miss some of those things, and you end up getting frustrated because it didn't look right. And if you had just taken a couple minutes, you can pick those up. As I was talking there, I was doing a little bit here on the ear, just bringing in a little bit of those highlights. And the thing that you probably have noticed is, I mean, this is real, there's multiple layers here that to finally get out here to these final highlight colors. It's kind of sneaking up on the highlights, I like to say, because what it is that it's real easy, and even though I do this every single day, I still get excited about getting to the point in the painting where I can put in those final highlights, the kind of the sugar on the top of the painting, the things that make it just pop out. I try to get to it sometimes sooner than what I should. It's a process, and if you do it correctly and are patient, it pays off in the end, and you can see the paintings where someone has taken the time to work into it rather than just jumping at it. And it's always a kind of a redefining or a fine-tuning of it as you go. This was just needed a little, again, there's very, very little paint on my brush, but there's just enough to put just kind of a little bit of a glow that's there, which is what we're trying to accomplish at this stage in the painting. Another spot that I'm not real happy with, and that is right out here on this leading edge of that nose. It's too dark and it's undefined, and I think it needs to have a little bit more definition there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of my dioxazine purple, a little bit of that rose red, and I'm mixing those together, a little bit of titanium white, and that kind of gives us that color. It's actually probably a little darker than what we want. If you notice what I was doing there, I have the paint on the end of my brush, and I'm just holding it up to the other colors that are similar to it already up there. And it's a little dark, but I think maybe I'll try it, and then I can always bring in a little bit of white to soften it up if we need to. So we'll just get a little bit right down that leading edge. That made a big difference. I will lighten it up a little bit, but not a whole lot. That's exactly what that needed, was just a little bit of redefining there. I'm bringing just a grazing across the top of that nose too. It probably needs to pull it down a little bit farther underneath for acting as a shadow. And the other thing too that in fact, I'll just do this to demonstrate it. Everything over here basically is dry. I've set this aside for a couple of days. I've just taken my paper towel and I've just kind of rolled it up. And let's say that you go, oh man, that's purple is way not right. I don't like that. It's real simple. You just come back in and just wipe it off. And then you just take and go back into your paint and do it again. In fact, I actually like how soft that was after I pulled it off. It actually, I like the look of it better than what I did even when I had it painted before I wiped it off. I'm pretty happy with that. I may take just a little bit of that turquoise and put that in against the top of it on the nose. I don't need a whole lot, just a little sliver that's coming down that might. Yeah, that made a big difference. Because what it did was it tied the coloring here, and that's up in the hat as well, down into the nose, which that side of the nose actually would be being hit by those pinks and lavenders and purples and turquoises that are coming in from that left side. So that looks pretty good. There's a couple more little things that I'd like to do on this. I mean, there's a lot more. I'll do this in the studio, but I just want to make a few things, point them out. The guitar here, it's got in the photograph has a lot more of those pinks that are reflecting in on the surface here, and I'd like to just kind of maybe bring in just a little bit of that into, like, that's almost like I had more purple in that, so we'll make another pile here. Yeah, that's a little better. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a really light, right along the neck of the guitar. You know, it's been a real kind of opened up my eyes in a lot of ways about things when John suffered this stroke here several weeks ago, and it kind of rattled my cage in many ways, because it kind of just reminded me of how fragile life is, and we take things so for granted a lot of times in our lives. And I've had a lot over the last year. I've had a lot of losses. A loss of probably the only true love I've ever had. I had loss of some credibility in a community because of some things that were said about me. I've had several people that have had major health issues, John being one of them. And then just this last week, the closest male friend I've ever had passed away, was in a car accident and was killed in a head-on collision. And I tell you, our lives are so fragile, and we take so many things for granted around us, people around us. And you know, I talk about it a lot on the show of taking time every day to look at your life and do something creative or whatever it might be that I am talking about that week. But I tell you, our lives are so short and shallow. They're not shallow, but they're fragile. And you know, it's hit me. I need to spend time with the people around me that I love, that I care about, people that are important in my life. I need to take the time to spend with them, tell them how much I love them and care for them, and appreciate them and what they mean to me in my life. Because tomorrow is never promised, and all of us think we've got a lot of time. We don't know. I may not make it home tonight from the taping of the show, and that could, you know, that's just, unfortunately, it's the reality of our life. Sometimes those losses can leave us feeling abandoned and distressed and hurting and lonely and depressed and anxiety and just so many things that can be manifest in your life. And those can be hard things to deal with. And I've had to deal with a lot of those things even within the last few weeks. And you know, it's always good when you've got nucleus of people around you and friends that you can share with and talk with. If you don't happen to have that in your life, I understand. There's people I can talk to, but I feel like they don't really understand it. And so a lot of times I just spend my time in the studio by myself, and I do a lot of time every day in meditation and praying, and that's good for me. It helps me. Last night, in fact, it was getting about, 10:30 or 11 last night, and had been in the studio painting for most of the day, and I walked out and the stars were shining and it was so calm and still, and I just loved being out at night. And I started a little fire pit. I've got a little fire pit, and I started a fire in it and sat there, opened up a bottle of wine and had a glass of wine, and just the stillness of the night, looking up into the heavens. Sometimes that's the best medicine that I can, at least for myself, and maybe you're the same way. It seems like in those moments where I'm just sitting there pondering, I hear with clarity things that my heart, soul, mind need to hear. I just think that, and I say this almost every week, and I keep saying it because I believe it's so important, of taking time every single day for you. I have to do it for me. And by doing that, I have more of a calm and more of a peace. I think that my outlook on life is much more open to the hurt around me, being able to help other people. I don't become so self-absorbed with my own insecurities and with my own problems. I can reach out and help others. Hopefully, maybe today in my little show, maybe talking about John and the painting that we've done, maybe it's stirred something in your heart that life is short. Don't take it for granted. And do the things that you need to for yourself, because if you don't, those around you are going to be affected. Set the example in your home. You go, oh man, I got a crazy life, got kids running around and have to fix dinner and got softball practice and this and this and this. That's true, but you take time for the things that are important to you in your life. And I'm telling you, that time alone is probably one of the most important things that you could do in your day. Until next week, be creative, have a joyful heart. Blessings to you. CJ, I love you as always. Thank you again for joining me today here on Art and Soul.